Welcome back to part 4. So I fixed the issue. It was secular dependencies and stuff. So the issue was, so let's look at the issue because it's a very common thing. So if you look at my class, my header file for voting grid, I just include the header files. I don't do forward declarations. I only include the header file. That should suffice, that should be enough. And then inside my voting analyzer, I only do a forward declaration because I'm only taking the reference. I don't want methods within the class. I only want to just promise it that okay, it's gonna get some type called voting grid. And then I needed the IO stream because I'm no longer including the voting grid header file. So I'm just gonna declare it here, and then I say using the string from the standard namespace. Or you can just remove that using and then just type standard like this, and then just remove this. You could do that too. But I'm just gonna choose this method to show you the different ways you can approach the problem. And then in my child class, the only thing I include is the voting analyzer header file. So it's this information. And let me see. I don't need to do a forward declaration, but it might complain again. So let's see. I don't need to do the forward declaration anymore. So I'm just gonna include the voting analyzer.age, and then it does all of that. So let's see something here. So I've made a promise that I'm gonna use that object, that class, and then now I need to make use of it. So let's double check something. Let me go into my predicted outcome analyzer, voting analyzer. That's right. Potential fraud, voting analyzer. I don't need to do the forward declaration since I'm already including the header file. And then now the question is, how will it know these methods? So I think when you have to implement, let me see, let me not mix them up. So I'm gonna approach it like this. So let's start with so let me remove this. So let's start with battlegrounds implementation. So for battleground, I'm gonna need the information for the voting grid for the functions. I'm gonna need that. So if you think about it, since battleground analyzer is already included or declared inside voting grid. If you check voting grid, there's voting grid. There's the include for battleground. Since it's already included there, instead of trying to include both the battleground and voting grid.age, I'm gonna only include voting grid.age because voting grid has the information about this class and I need it. And it also includes my battleground analyzer header file, which is this. So yeah, you need to make sure you avoid secular dependencies. Yeah, it's a painful it's something really painful that you don't want. So let's continue. Let's check. So what is battleground supposed to do? Analyzes method to perform the battleground analysis. So it's at the top. The implementations are at the top. This is where they are. So battleground analysis should be like this. So we should do the following if statements. So before I do that, I need to access the rows and columns. So because they said for each voting district, and each voting district is represented by a specific row and column coordinate. So if that's the case, then we need to do a couple of changes inside our voting grid class. So I'm going to start by going to the voting grid.h, the header file, and create my accessors. Just going to create them here, accessors. And then this is just going to be the destructor. Accessors, I need to access the rows and columns. So I need to return an unsigned int, get rows, and then should return a constant. Then I should return an unsigned int, get columns, return a constant. Make sure it's of type const, and then copy, then go this side inside my source file or my implementation file, and then implement it somewhere there. And then copy voting grid. There we go. There we go. There we go. So we have the two helper functions, and then I'm just going to return underscore rows, and then I'm just going to return underscore columns. So there we go. We have our rows and columns accessors. So now since we have the accessors, now we can iterate. So I can say for unsigned int r is equal to 0, r is less than, and then now I need to give it a name so that I can be able to reference. obj grid, let me just call it grid. obj grid dot get rows r plus plus, then for unsigned int c is equal to 0, c is less than obj grid dot get calls c plus plus, and then so that's it. We get in the rows and the columns, and then we will check what is supposed to output. So symbols for each displays the symbols for each depending on how the two parties are. So if the difference is okay, so I also need to get the voting district. So what is the voting district? It's a two-dimensional array, right? So I need to create an accessor to get each district. So, okay, it's not unsigned. It's a voting district that I must get back. So get district. Wait, we are not changing the districts. We're just checking the difference. So I'm just getting the district. So district takes in, this is the signature, takes into values, a row and a column. And then const, because it's only meant to access, we don't want to mutate. It's not a mutator, it's an accessor. So we're gonna have this, and then copy, paste, and then I'm gonna have row and column. So before we work with the row and column, we need to enforce the range. Make sure the row is in the right range and the column is in the right range. So it's between minimum value of 0, of which we have a constant for it, and up to rows minus 1. Then enforce range column min value underscore calls minus 1. After I've enforced the range, we can return the district. Voting, that specific row, that specific column. That's it. We are done getting the district. So now we can use that getter. So what I'm going to do to make things simple, I'm going to store the voting district into a temporary variable. So obj grid.get district for that specific row and column. And then, yeah, we've gotten the district, so now we can do the comparison. So I need to subtract and then see what the difference is. And it's based on two parties. So what I need to do is I'm not sure which one is going to be greater than the other, so I'm going to use a function that finds an absolute value of the difference between the two. So let's say I choose to say APU minus UAP. What if APU is smaller? It's 9 and UAP is 38. What I can do is I can still compute the difference and then use the absolute function to find the absolute to make it positive like this. So to make that difference positive, I don't have to do if statements to check if this is greater than this, if this, I don't have to do that. So I'm just gonna get the difference and it's a double. So I'm gonna call it difference. Then I say is equals to the absolute function. And I want the one that takes in a double because I'm working with doubles. Then I want to say district dot APU support minus district dot UAP support. And then it's gonna subtract, that doesn't matter which value is bigger. At the end of the day, I'm gonna find the absolute value of that answer. Now I have a difference. Now I can do what? If statements. So I can say if the difference is less than 5%, so if it's less than 5, so if difference happens to be less than 5, remember it's double, so it's 5%. So it's 5.0. And then it should output that character, the exclamation character. So now what I need to also make use of is the string stream. Let me see, did I include it inside voting read.h? Yeah, I did. So I can just use it. Yeah. Okay, so I need to specify that it's from the standard namespace. Yeah, I need to specify from the standard namespace. So what I would do is I'll just do this. I'll just say using standard string stream like this. Then now I don't have to specify that it's this and that. But wait, I'm also gonna use let me see, n line character. It's from the standard namespace. So I'm just gonna specify all the things that I'm gonna need. I won't use the whole namespace because I'm only using a section of the standard namespace. And then it should output, so I should put it into the string stream, what character, the exclamation character. And then it should be followed by an empty space. Right, and then I'm gonna have another if statement, else if difference is greater than, is from 6. So they said it's less than or equals to. It should be less than or equals to, I'm assuming, but they didn't say less than or equals to, they just said less than. So we're just gonna leave it like this. So if it's greater than or equals to 6 and difference is less than from 6 to 10, so that's inclusive. So it's less than or equal to 10.0. Then this should be 6.0. And then it should output which character, the modulus or the percent character. So let me see. I just realized something. I don't have to put that space separately. I can just put it here. As you can see, this is equal to this. You see, it's the same space. So I can just avoid that and just output the space afterwards like this. It's gonna work exactly the same way. And then from 11 to 20, else if difference is greater than or equal to 11 and difference is less than or equals to 20. 11 to 20, right? Yes. I'll put the character, the asterisk character, put a space afterward. And then if it is greater than 21. So that's basically an else. That's the only, it can only be greater than 21. So I can just make it an else. Or you can use an else if, it's fine. And then I should output the dot character followed by a space. Yeah, followed by a space. And then after the inner for loop, the column for loop, I'm going to output an end of line character. So end of line character. There we go. And then I'm going to return the string stream, but a string representation of it. So dot to string. And then let's build to make sure we are still on the right track. Yes, we are on the right track. So this is how you'd calculate it. Then we have the other classes to implement, the child classes. So let's do that. So Battleground, we're done. Let's do potential fraud. So with potential fraud, to avoid secular dependencies, I'm only going to include the voting grid.h because the voting grid also has this. It also includes the potential fraud header file. So in order for me to avoid secular dependencies, I'm going to do that. And we're still going to use the string stream. So standard string stream. Let me see. In my header file, okay, that's fine. And we're also going to use the new line character. So I'm going to do that. This is very good. This approach is very useful. Don't include the whole namespace. It's going to make your application very slow, very big too. It's unnecessarily big because you're including the whole library and you're not even using everything in the library. That's a problem. You don't want to do that. So we have this. Obviously, we're going to iterate through everything. So rows equals to 0, row is less than. Then we need to give this a name, obj grid. We need to call it obj grid dot get rows r plus plus. Then for unsigned int c is equals to 0, c is less than obj grid dot get calls c plus plus. And then now we're going to check what we're supposed to do. Potential fraud displays different symbols for each district. Okay, if the sum of supporters for each party and the undecided voters does not add up to 100%, it's within 1%, then the voting district's ID is output, or the voting district's ID is the output. This analysis takes the form of a list, not a grid. Also, it takes the form of a list. So it's not gonna be a grid, it's gonna be like a one line thing. So we need to check the sum of the supporters of each party and the undecided voters does not add up, or the sum of the voter and vote. So I'm adding the sum of every party. So double sum is equals to obj grid. Okay, so let's store the district. Let's do that. Voting district is equals to obj grid dot get district for that row and column. Put a semicolon to end the statement. So double sum, let's find the sum. The sum is equals to district this district UAP support plus this districts dot APU support plus this districts dot undecided party. We have that sum, and then we need to check that sum and check if it does not add up to 100%. If it doesn't add up to 100%, then the voting district's ID is the output. If the sum does not add up to 100, then, okay, I need to create a string stream, and then inside the string stream, I'm gonna take the district's ID as output. So the district's ID, this takes the analysis of, this analysis takes the form of a list, not a grid. So that means it's going to be like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be something like this. So I'm going to say dot row and then district dot district ID dot column. And there must be a space in between them. So a space like this. And then, okay, it shouldn't, let me see, a space in between them and a space after the column so that there's spaces everywhere. Okay, so I want it to be, okay, I don't have to worry about that. Let's not worry about the readability and whatever. I don't have to worry about that. So they said it should be a list, so this is fine. I don't have to worry about making it a list. About, okay, so the shadow should combine the values. We can put like this square brackets and then have the values like this. We can do that. So I'm gonna do that. I want it to be like this, right? There we go. That's how it is. And then I also want to have a closing bracket, square bracket, and an opening square bracket. How do we do that? So way before I go into the for loop, I put an opening square bracket there. And then immediately after that, I put the value, which is gonna be the row. And I can also make it a bit fancy. I can do this. I can make it like this in such a way that is a list, but I don't have to do that. And then at the end, I'm gonna put a closing square bracket. Then let's not forget to convert this to a string. Okay, so it's gonna return a string representation. I'm gonna use the dot str function, which converts to a string. Okay, it's compiled successfully. Now we need to do the last function, this one. And we're gonna include voting grid.h instead, so that we avoid secular dependencies. So I'm gonna say using string stream and new line character. So that's what I'm gonna be using. And then I'm gonna have obj grid. And then before we start, I'm gonna create a string stream object. And then I'm gonna iterate through my rows and columns. So r is less than obj grid dot get rows r plus plus. And then for unsigned int c is equal to 0, c is less than obj grid dot get columns c plus plus. Okay, and then I'm obviously gonna get the district so that it makes my code readable. Dot get district that row and column. I'm gonna create a temporary variable so that it makes my code readable. So a predicted outcome. If UAP has the highest support in the district, then it will be displayed using AU. And then if the UP has the highest support, it will be displayed using an A character. If the undecided voters have the highest in a district, it will be displayed as the question mark character. After displaying the grid, the total number of voters for the two parties is displayed. Does not need to be rounded off. So they said after displaying the grid, so after displaying all of the characters. Okay, so that's fine. So we need to find the maximum. I think there's a max function here. If I'm not mistaken, there should be a maximum function. Yeah, there should be. I forgot which. It has to be in the math library, CMath library. So let's do that. I don't want to redefine things. Oh, okay, I didn't include it. That's why. So let's see if it is really indeed there, but I think it is there. Maximum. Okay, let me do this. Const type. Let me check. Okay, yeah, there is a maximum function. So I will need to use the maximum function and it's in the standard namespace. So I'm gonna do that so that I can just reference it as max, make things simple. So let's see. Let me find a maximum, right? So in order for me to find a maximum, I must have three variables. So I must say max1 and max2. So max1 is the maximum between the APU support and the UAP support. So that's the first maximum I'm gonna find between those two values. And then I find another maximum, DVL max 2, or I can just call it max. This is okay, I can just call it actual max. Is the actual maximum. So how am I going to find it? I'm going to take the previous maximum, max1, and compare it with the undecided. Undecided, right? Because I need to find the maximum between all three values. So I find the max, since this function only takes in 2 parameters at a time, I'm going to trick it. I'm going to find the maximum between APU support and UAP. Then I use that maximum as input to find another maximum between that answer that I got and the undecided value. Then now, based on the maximum, I'm going to check if the maximum is equals to APU or UAP or undecided, then I'll put the corresponding character. So if my actual maximum is equals to the APU, that means APU is the highest. And then if it is the highest, if UAP is the highest, it will display U. It's UAP. Obviously, must find a way to indicate itself that it is the highest. So it should output U. And then else if actual max is equals to district dot UAP support, that means UAP support is the, wait, UAP, oh yeah, UAP, this should be a APU, you should output the A character. UAP, you should output U. So we're outputting the first characters basically. The first character of first characters in the word, so it's APU, so I'm gonna output A first. It's UAP, starts with U, so I'm gonna output U. Then I can either do an else or an else if. But I know that if it's else, that means it can only be equal to what? Undecided. So like I'll just use else, and then for undecided, it's a question mark. Obviously, it's undecided. You don't know. So it's just gonna be a question mark. And then I'm gonna put a new line character there. And then at the end, they said we should display the total number of voters for the two parties. So the total number of voters for party 1 and party 2, so UAP and APU. So it's simple. We're just going to say SS and then we display. And then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to use for the two parties, right? So let me see, obj grid dot oh, the sum for the two parties. So I have to sum them up. Yeah, for the two parties. So there's more than one district. So I need to sum them up for all districts. So I need to create a sum here. So double sum equals to 0.0. And then I'm gonna sum them up. And they say the two. So it means that it's only, so plus equals, so I needed to keep adding to that sum variable. So that if they said it's 2, that means it can only be APU and UAP. The undecided, remember the undecided's main function is if you didn't have people voting for both APU and UAP. They voted for neither, so it becomes undecided. So I have the sum now, and then I'm gonna put an end of line, a new line character, and then I return my string, but I'm gonna convert it to a string. So there we go, that's the logic. We are done with our implementation. And I think that should be about it. That should be everything. We are actually done with everything. So let me double check something in my voting grid. How am I initializing the information? So I want it to truncate. Remember that the file is not there. I actually create the file. So the file is not there. So yeah, by default it truncates. So this is fine. I can just leave it like this. So I want us to run it like this. There we go. And then I want to see if it did change the file. Let me see. Do this. And then I have to open it again because it only changed. And I actually only need to call it once. I only need to call the function to generate ones to add to the file. But for some weird reason, I feel like it didn't add to the file, or I didn't. That's the right name though. Did I pass in the right name? Input.txt. Exactly, I did pass the names. Did pass the names, unless if the way I'm implementing it is not sufficient. Let's see. So to the file, add output this, then output a random value between 0 and that. Yeah, it should be fine. Unless if it's, let me just add the mode. So I want to output, and I also want to truncate whatever information is there. I want to delete the information. So I'm just gonna say trunc for truncating. Then I run it. It is compiled. Then I open the folder again. Let's check. Why isn't it changing? Why isn't it changing though? It should be changing. Da, 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 da. But yeah, that's pretty much everything. Let me try and decipher and fix what is wrong here with the generation of values. Let me see. Takes in the file name. I did do that correctly. And then output dot blah blah blah. It should be writing to the file. It most definitely should. Now the question is, why isn't it writing to the file? Output dot close. It did close the file. Yeah, everything is fine. I just create a voting grid. That's all I do. I create the voting grid. And then okay, let me call load from text. Load from text. What? That's the text file's name. It's that one. And then let's just do something simple. Okay, so it's gonna complain. I want to use the cout in the standard namespace. So cout obj grid dot get rows. I want to see if it. I'm just gonna try to output one value to see if it did get something. So it did get. Okay, so I don't know why it doesn't show the values though. I don't know why it doesn't show the value. It should show the values because when I call get rows, it's getting the 25. Remember that when I save into the file, I save it as 25. So that means it is working. So since it is working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load from the file, and then I'm going to call the analyze function, right? So dot analyze and then inline character. So I want to use the inline character to, let's see if there's going to be some output. There we go. So I don't know why it doesn't change when I open the txt file, but it is actually storing. As you can see, there they are. That's everything. So there's the number of rows, and we do append everything together. And as you can see, I made that list that I made. It has square brackets. They said it should be a list, not a grid. So that's why I put it like this. And with there's this space that I don't like. I was avoiding it, but yeah, this space, you see the space here, we can fix that. So let me show you how to fix it. So we're gonna go to our voting grid and we're gonna go to, wait, I need to find okay, it's not this one. I need to find, what is this? The right child class that was implementing the one square brackets. Yeah, this is the one. So what I'm going to do is, you see the space, this is the one that's affecting it. It's adding it even when I reach the last element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. Then for the space, I'm only going to add it as long as I'm not equal to the end of the column. Or let me see. Yeah, as long as I'm not equal to the end of the, oh, because it's gonna output all of them in a straight line. Then we go to the next row, it outputs them in a straight line. So what I can do is, I can say once I've reached the end of, let me see. I need to add the space immediately after the values. So I think if I can say if C is not equals to obj read dot get columns -1, then I should output a space. As long as I'm not equal to the last column, then keep adding the space. So the moment I reach the last column, it won't add the space. It's either I can do that for the row or the column. Okay, so that means I need to do it for the rows, because now, okay, it does fix that issue, but now it creates another issue. So yeah, it's fine. We'll just leave it. I don't want to overthink it. But yeah, this is in essence what you're supposed to do. This is how it's supposed to look. There we go. That's everything. There's the characters. Everything is as expected. And there's the total number of supporters for both parties. So that's it. If you have any questions, you let me know.